Hello, welcome to Temple Talk. Before we begin, I need to mention a few things. Firstly, I am not an official representative of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, nor am I sponsored by them. I'm doing this on my own time and on my own dime. Secondly, every resource I use to create each episode are all publicly available material approved by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I will always include links in each episode description. Lastly, if you'd like to learn more about our beliefs regarding the temple and all things, I will also include a link to the website churchofjesuschrist.org in the episode description. Thanks for tuning in, and now for the episode. Hello, welcome to Temple Talk. My name is Camille. I will be your Temple Talker today. And today I have two very special guest Temple Talkers to come talk about the history of the Houston Temple. I invited them because they served as the temple president and the matron while I was serving as a worker and have a lot of great insights as to how the temple was made. So without further ado, would you like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Norma Haynes, and I love the temple.
Me too. Good thing to love.
And I'm her husband, Al Haynes, and I as well enjoy and love serving and experiencing the temple house of the Lord.
That. Are you both from Houston? Have you always lived here?
Well, we've been here about 35 years.
It's home
so
at this point.
It's home.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm still getting used to the weather. I'm from Colorado. It's warm in Texas, but I like it. As long as you're willing to drive 40 plus minutes anywhere, it's a good place to live. I kind of put together, so today we're talking about how the Houston Temple came to be and some of the amazing miracles of the Lord and blessings and resources that came into the Houston Temple. Coming into existence. They just announced, we're coming right off of General Conference, they announced another temple in Houston. Are you so excited for that?
Yes, we're very excited.
Where do you think they're going to put it? Did they say northern area?
No, it's going to be in the south.
It's going to be awesome. I'm so excited. We have a lot of workers that drive really far to get to the temple, so this is going to be, I'm so excited. I'm going to be quoting a lot from this book called The Gift of Love. I will put a link in the description. It's a limited edition, so I don't think it's necessarily available to buy, but I want to quote a lot of things from it. It was put together as a compilation of all the stories that came into the Houston Temple, and so I'll be using that as a big resource. But basically, I thought I'd start with how the church grew in Texas. In 1848, 3 missionaries were called to preach in Texas. During the Civil War in 1875, the Southern States Mission was formed. Many saints immigrated to Utah, and in 1901, the leaders recommended saints stay where they were and build up the kingdom. Due to growth in the oil fields and the Air Force Base, by 1931, there were 2,600 members. A Mrs. Gussie Farmer donated her home and 2 lots to the church in her will, which provided the church the ability to build a chapel. In 1953, there was 1 stake. In 2001, there were 22 stakes and 5 missions, which is pretty amazing. And how you said you had been here 35 years? So you've seen this area grow a lot in the church. In 1996, Marcia Fox, the stake public affairs media director, wrote an outline of a book, The Field is White, to be sent to the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 Apostles to show the growth of the church in the area and the need for a temple to be built into the area. Do you remember when the temple was announced? Was that at a conference? And you have any feelings about when you heard about the Texas temple coming?
Well, I was a part of the assembly of that book, The Field is White.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes.
Was that included in the cornerstone? I know they put items in the cornerstone.
Sure.
Do you remember? Okay.
Sure. But I remember going up to Salt Lake with Elmo Robinson at the time and meeting with various individuals in the leadership of the church, and our attempt to distribute the book to every person, beginning with the First Presidency. And we were unsuccessful. They agreed to take the book and distribute it for us.
Okay.
But of course, in that book, we suggested that there was some value in having a temple in the Houston area. The reason I share that part with you is because during the dedication of the Houston Temple, we were privileged to be a part of that group that was in the celestial room with President Hinckley. And he chose that moment to single me out as the key lobbyist for a temple in
Not
Houston.
know that.
Yeah, it was in jest, but it was good.
I miss President Hinckley. He had a spitfire personality and some great dogs too. That's amazing. I didn't realize. So it wasn't a big, not necessarily a surprise to you, but it was just very a confirming thing to you when the temple was announced.
Well, that was, that the Fearless White book was distributed in the early 90s.
Mhm.
And it wasn't for, until mid 90s or so that the work had been done and sites identified as potential locations for a possible temple in Houston.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's been a fun history.
Yes. Yep. We're going to dive right in. Do you remember any feelings when it was announced?
I will share with you
Mhm.
something that maybe some people don't know. And that was we had just delivered our daughter to school up at Rexburg.
Mhm.
And we were on our way home. And Al was checking in with his office to see if there were things that he needed to be aware of. And just at the close of the conversation, he says, Norma, get a notepad and a pencil, quick, quick. He is literally in saluting formation in the car. And he is taking down a phone number. And after he hung up, he told me the conversation was, and there was a Gordon Hinckley that called you and wants to talk with you.
Oh my goodness. That's a good name.
And had left his phone number, and it was about the temple.
That's amazing. So you got to talk to President Hinckley directly. That's pretty amazing. That is such a cool story. I really appreciate that. I don't know if this is necessarily true, but I feel like all the stories I hear about with President Hinckley choosing sites for the temple, it was always the really difficult ones to obtain. It was always the ones the Lord wanted and had plans for. But I understand this temple, the land, was not necessarily available. So I thought I'd kind of talk about this, that Houston realtor Stephen R. Cook was instructed to seek out some possible sites for a special project for the church between 5 to 8 acres. Ted Simmons, head of the real estate department for the church, went to see 6 sites identified as possible places. A 20-acre site across the street from the Cook's possible place was of interest. The land belonged to Don Hand. I'm sure you met with Don Hand, I would imagine.
Yes.
What do you remember about him?
Well, we need to back up a little bit.
Okay.
As I've studied the history of temples, and especially the recent history, and it was clear that, at least in our mind, that the Lord was intending to make temples available to more people.
Mm-hmm.
And President Hinckley was the one that was assigned to launch that.
Mm-hmm.
Every temple has, in my opinion, its own story and its own sort of customized experience where individuals played a key role in identifying and assisting in accomplishing what we consider to be the purposes of God. And that is to identify and locate sacred and holy places where He can come and be a part of, the encouragement of each one of us to be better.
Mm-hmm.
So Houston was no exception.
Mm-hmm.
And again, looking historically, I've always been impressed at how individuals, whether or not they happen to be members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, have had a role and have had an influence in accomplishing these purposes. And Don Hand was one of those. Clearly, the opportunity to meet with Don, to have lunch with him, and actually to share an association with him for over the years, up until really just a few months before he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
It's been sort of a singular honor and privilege for me. Don, it was first and foremost a businessman.
Mm-hmm.
And if he saw a deal, he went for it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet at the same time, Don had a deep and profound level of obligation based on commitments he had made during some really tough times in his life to do what he could to help God in his accomplishing his purpose. And that's really at the genesis, or if you will, at the heart of the whole initiative that ended up having the Houston Temple located where it was an individual who felt an obligation to repay in some way. And I'll never forget having lunch with him literally a few days after the site had been approved with Steve Cook, and the three of us visiting and Don sharing his story. And so, yes, I have a huge regard for Don, for his moral compass and being in the right place at the right time where it needed to be.
Would you say he was a pretty ambitious person as a businessman, or was he a little more relaxed?
Oh no, no, he was all business.
Yeah,
and it showed. I mean, there were not very many real estate developer survivors of the recession of the 1980s.
That's a good point.
Very few. Don survived and then excelled. And he survived, I think, to a large extent to his dedication and commitment to helping, to doing what he could to provide a philanthropic commitment on behalf of God and his purposes. And that's how it, that was pretty clear.
Absolutely. He spoke at a conference, didn't he? He was invited to speak to, was it the youth or was it, I can't remember.
We invited him. I was still president at the time, and he spoke at one of our adult Saturday evening sessions.
Perfect. I actually have his story. I was going to quote.
So did his wife, Judy.
Did you get to meet Don Hand as well?
Yes.
His wife.
And yes, wonderful people.
God, they did an amazing service, and the area is gorgeous. It's a beautiful crowning glory, I would say, crowning jewel of that area.
Well, that's exactly what Don said. He spent literally an agonizing weekend dealing with the matter because he had other plans for that property. And it actually put a pretty substantial amount into plans and development scenarios for that corner. And it was a tough weekend, a sleepless weekend, as he described it to us, when he realized that he hadn't done enough to repay the Lord for his kindness and his mercy. And that this was going to be the crown jewel, as he described it.
I saw that it said in the book that Don later affectionately referred to Steve Cook as the pest because of his persistence in acquiring the land. We know President Hinckley visited all the prospective sites, and he called President Hanks. The decision was made that was the land that they wanted to use. Don Hand soon called later to say he had had the terrible weekend. He hadn't been able to sleep. He decided to sell the property for the Mormon cathedral. He explained that he and his wife had faced a financial crisis, and he had prayed the Lord would help him. He would find a way to repay God if he did. As everything improved, he had been on the lookout to fulfill his promise. He gave a lot of donations to his church and other churches, but never felt it was quite enough. And then he felt the inspiration that having the land for the church and the temple being built there would make everything right with the Lord. I know the design of the temple, too, was a little bit tricky because they wanted to reflect the area and some of the properties that Don had developed in the area. And the designer went to visit a church interior designer, and his office was a picture of the old Washington, D.C. chapel. And that picture kind of appeared that he saw gave them the direction that they needed. Have either of you been to the Washington, D.C. chapel?
We've seen the picture.
Yeah, it looks very similar. It had been dedicated by President Grant and was proclaimed to be a monument and a memorial to progress, strength, and the vitality of the great and glorious work in which we're engaged. The chapel was later used in World War II as a place of lodging for workers and servicemen. And then in 1976, the chapel was sold. I had to include this. I loved this. That when President Hinckley saw the design that they had come up for the temple that looked very similar to the Washington, D.C. chapel, he approved it, but said that it should be a little softer in design. And then later, Don Hand, when he saw that the design the next day, said he really liked the design, but thought it should be a little softer, which was the exact same words that President Hinckley used. And so they were able to make those changes, and it was met with official approval. The current temple president, President Tolman, mentioned that and this was while I was serving, so this was a while ago, but he said he felt prompted to go visit with Don Hand and thank him so much again for allowing the church to purchase that area, and just thank him for how amazing it's been that we've had a temple there. And he said a few weeks later, Don Hand passed away. So I thought that was just really neat that our current temple president was able to meet with him and just give him another thanks. So I think it's just a super sweet story. It was kind of came full circle with his generosity. And then in October 1997, President Hinckley announced the temple would be built.
Well, there's another element to this.
Yes, please
that
do.
I think is really important.
Mhm.
Don was heading over to Spain.
Okay.
He would go, in fact, he was, if you had seen his home,
Mhm.
It's very Gothic
Mhm.
looking.
Mhm.
And he loved that kind of Gothic old world look.
Yeah.
He was invited when he went to Spain to, at the time, I think it was the Madrid temple was under construction. And he was invited to tour that site and to look it over. That was probably the final validation for Don that this was, we needed to do this. And that's why he referred to the temple as a cathedral because of his attraction to these great edifices from Europe. Actually, the temple department showed him a rendering of a temple which was kind of along the style of the day back in the 90s, the mid-90s, probably best represented by the Billings, Montana temple.
Oh, interesting.
It was out of that that both he and President Hinckley said, no, that's not acceptable. And it was an interesting dynamic. In fact, one of my concerns was whether or not the church would even proceed to negotiate, because Don made two conditions that were unique to this one. One was that he had to approve the design on the outside. He held that right as part of the transaction.
Sure.
That's unusual.
That is unusual.
And so, if you look at the artist's renderings, and by the way, the architect's renderings of that temple hung in Don Hand's office. Every time I would meet with him, there it was. So it really did mean something to him.
Yeah.
And that final architect's rendering, if you look at it and you look at the temple today, you'll find a nice mix of Gothic, Nauvoo,
good
and
point.
Presbyterian.
Yeah, fascinating.
So, it was an amazing process, to be a part of.
I know they mentioned a little later when they were finding the stone to build the temple that they felt it was a little risky. They found this gorgeous Italian stone, but it wasn't white or even off-white. It was kind of this gray with black flecks in it. And they sent samples to Salt Lake to be approved. And they said that in that committee, they were a little nervous about that because it didn't fit kind of the traditional mold of some of the previous temples. And yet that was the one that was approved. And it's a beautiful temple. Every temple is beautiful in its own right. But I think Houston especially, it has a special spirit to it.
Well, it's unique.
Yeah. So I had that in 1998, the groundbreaking occurred, and it was Elder D. Todd Christofferson, who was the second counselor in the North America Southwest area, that he spoke. And you were able to speak at the press conference, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I conducted the press conference.
Oh, you conducted the press conference.
I did.
That's pretty neat. Any memories that you have from that you'd like to share?
No, it was a wonderfully collaborative effort on the part of especially the LDS community in the Houston area. We had been able to establish some strong relationships and positive relationships over at least the period of the early 90s going into, the whole decade. And so it was a pretty simple process. And one of the things that we were particularly, I think, blessed to know is Houston has no zoning. And so permitting and regulatory approvals, once you understood how they work, went pretty fast. So it was a positive thing. And
Right.
we talk about Dawn, but to me, equally as engaged in a positive way was the HOA and the utility district and the city of Houston, because those were the only players that could have stood in the way.
I see.
It was an extraordinarily positive experience for everybody.
Nice. I know other histories and temples, there was a lot of work to get the area and all the people in the surrounding area to be supportive and to help out.
And I think as you look in retrospect, you can see the hand of the Lord empowering the people to be in the right place, just like Al was in the right place at the right time to be an instrument in the Lord's hands. And that happened with the architect, with the mud, with the different people that he had worked with and knew about, and built a relationship, and that, just not him, but others. And because of that relationship, there was trust. And that's, I think that's why the Lord wants us to get out of our homes and get out into the community and serve, because he can use us if we're in the right place doing the right things.
Love that. Thank you for that thought. I just thought about this with temple scheduling, that if this wasn't the Lord's true church, that nothing would work on the temple schedule, because every miracle along the way is all directed by the Lord. It just strengthens my testimony knowing all the people involved, all the schedules involved, and even just that small aspect of working a shift and how it all works out, let alone how everything comes together for the community to build the temple. It really is retrospectively looking and just saying, oh, I see the Lord was in it all along. So that's so neat. Were you able to did you get one of the shovels and get to do part of the groundbreaking? Was that something you got to do?
Along with a whole lot of other people.
Yeah. No, I know. Don't you worry.
But it was really kind of nice.
Yeah, seriously. I like the picture. Elder Christofferson looks pretty young in the pictures. It was a little bit ago. So I'd mentioned before, the temple was built with the Italian granite. Samples were sent. They felt it was a little risky because it wasn't technically white or even off-white, but it was approved. And then, were you there when the Angel Moroni statue was placed? I know there was a lot of press conferences surrounding it and a lot of people prepared, and it sounded like there was a big gathering for that. Do you remember that day?
Oh, I do. It was really a warm day.
I believe it. It's Houston.
But it was such an exciting time.
Yeah.
And I came with my little I don't even know if she was 3 yet, year-old granddaughter. And they had primary children there, and just a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it was exciting because the temple was just a shell.
Yeah, it said they placed it about a year before the building's completion.
Yes,
So yeah,
I mean, it was just
none of the facade had been put on. It was just a steel frame.
it's so neat. That would be a little scary to watch. You know it's going to work out, but the people know what they're doing. But it's still, I feel like there's like a little breath holding moment of, is it going to go okay?
It was really exciting because then, as we would drive by, you always saw
right there,
the Moroni, and it was fun to see the walls come up. And
I believe it.
It was great. It was wonderful.
Did you live close to the Houston Temple by that point, or were the area okay? Yeah, when you drive.
Still do.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. So when you drive by, you see that Angel Moroni is one of the first things you see because there's a lot of trees in the area. And I was reading in the book that it said a lot of construction workers felt like Angel Moroni was watching over their work, and it encouraged them to do their work to their best abilities because Angel was right there watching. It was pretty amazing.
Once the land is dedicated, the Spirit of the Lord is there, and it's sacred. We had an occasion to take some friends that were not members of the church that were from Hungary. And the minute we drove on the property, you can just feel it. But we were apologizing or just telling them that they would not be able to go inside the temple And one of them said, I don't need to. I felt it the minute I drove through the gate.
That's so beautiful. It's a beautiful land. That's really neat. I think everyone in the community can feel it. You can feel that. I've never been on temple land that's been dedicated before temple was built there, so that's really neat to know. They also, I know the church holds all the workers to higher standards, no graffitiing and no littering in the area and things like that. I think they try to just make it a really positive experience for the community and for the workers as well. And it mentioned in the book that they had to redo a lot of things over and over until it was just right because it's very, very high level of craftsmanship that was required. They wouldn't accept anything less than the best that they could do, which is really neat. And it shows all the temples. Again, they all have their own unique aspects, but they're made to last and they're made to always be beautiful. I had written, and I really liked this, Bruce Finlinson was walking around in France. He was one of the temple interior designers. And he walked past an antique shop near the Louvre and found a unique crystal piece. It was this purple vase with an iris carved on the front, which is now in the matron's office. And then he got 2 more of those bowls to enhance the splendor of the celestial room. It's so beautiful, that vase. I got the chance to see that. It's really beautiful. And apparently that was a centerpiece that helped him focus on the design of the church interior. Elder Holland, when he visited the Houston temple during his dedicatory visit, pronounced that this could be one of the finest temples that we've ever made, which I think is pretty neat.
And of course, we think it is.
Of course, yes. We got to love it just as much as they do. Again, I don't have time to cover so many of the stories, but the decorative painter, Brother Jolly, was able to put on a lot of the floral patterns and gold leaf ornamentation throughout the temple. He wrote his favorite part of the project was painting the iris wall medallions in the celestial room. His technique produced a 3-dimensional effect with paint and brush that helped create the appearance of carved wood. He had helped work on 56 temples before. The gold leafing process was difficult and similar to what they did in ancient processes in Solomon's temple. 24-karat gold is pounded into thin strips and attached to a glued surface. It took the painters over 2 months to complete the gold leaf accents, which is, when you see it, it's a small detail, but just how intricate just one piece is, that really adds to the beauty of the temple. It's pretty amazing. I have Kathy Bernard's story about how she did the etched glass. And I didn't realize this. As you walk up the staircase, as you ascend, it starts with the beginning stages of a flower and it goes from a bud to a blossom as you go with all the etched glasses. I didn't know that. She wanted to try to include the Indian paintbrush flowers, blue bonnets, and crepe myrtles. And then she later felt prompted to include the iris flower. And when she had called Brother Jolly to tell him she felt prompted to include the iris, he had independently come to the same design decision to include the iris, which, we know independently. It's the spirit guiding them to do that. Greg Johnson, he was a carpet sculptor, which sounds like the most painful job ever. I can't imagine being bent over intricately, carving stuff into carpet. As a dental hygienist, that just hurts my hands and my back to think about. But I liked that he talked about how in the ceiling room around the altar that there are these 2 twining ribbons around the altars, which kind of symbolizes unity. Aubrey Connor, a floral designer, wanted to have the silk petals to just be softer, more realistic instead of artificial flowers. And he created over 100 silk floral arrangements for the temple. Graham Jones was the art glass designer, and he was a London artist who had replaced some of the Westminster's Abbey's Poet Corner stained glass that had been destroyed during World War II. He designed all the stained glass for the Houston temple, and there are 120 stained glass windows in the Houston temple. And then I have a little bit about the story of Richard Gieske. He approached you, was that right? And talked about how he had some ideas for the landscaping of the temple. Do you have any memories about that or anything you wanted to share?
Sure. At the time, he had some maturing, white blossoming crepe myrtles, but not enough. And we had, so I recall, we had been able to identify an old apartment complex that was being torn down in the city. And I think Richard acquired those. And those were the first plantings. They're not there anymore. But he offered, he had a pretty elaborate nursery. And he basically offered to gift everything to the grounds of the temple.
He said that he had an inspiration to be able to start growing some of those plants for an eventual temple, which is pretty neat. His granddaughter, she and I went to the same dental hygiene school, so I got to know the family a little bit better there. And he had been offered to sell the trees many times, but he always refused to sell them because he had felt that they were going to be used for a greater purpose. And I didn't know this when I was reading through it, that the irrigation system was insufficient for the Houston's intense summer heat. And they had to add 5 more irrigation zones to be installed. And before October, the plants were hand watered by volunteers every day through July into September. That's a lot of hand watering. That's really impressive. And y'all know how hot June summers and July summers get in Texas. So yeah, that was just kind of little bits I had about the design. On August 3rd, 2000, a press conference was held in the temple's waiting room for the open house activities. In just over 2 weeks, 110,000 people were able to visit the temple. The hosted tour model was so effective that it was implemented in future temple open house designs. Did you both, I'm assuming both went to the temple open house?
Oh, yes. We were very much involved.
I believe that. Every day. Wow.
Every day we were.
It's a 2-week. It said within 2 weeks. So is that, because I think most open houses are about 2 weeks. Is that right? I guess it depends.
Then they were.
Okay.
Some of the areas I know will go longer.
Okay.
3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
But 110,000 people, and they still had to turn people away the last night.
That
was still a line, and we tried to convince the time President Delmar, look, give us another hour. There's still people there. And one of the people we were waiting on was the mayor.
Wow. Were you part of leading any of the tours or bringing people with, or what was your involvement with the open house? Okay.
We did most of the VIP tours.
Wow. Okay.
Which was a unique and new approach.
I see.
Yeah. Initially, the plan was to assign a VIP tour for a certain period of time on a certain day, the first day or two. And we were able to convince the folks, whoever were in charge of that thing, you can't treat VIPs like that.
Right. You don't get the same experience.
You don't work them around your schedule.
Right.
You work around their schedule. That's when it opened up. And the Houston Temple, I think, was one of the very first to actually do a non-silent tour. We were trained, a whole new initiative. So,
was there kind of a script that you followed then that you would do in each area? Oh, okay.
I mean, I didn't write it.
Sure.
Elder
Pinnaker.
Pinnaker was the general authority that was putting that together. But the open house was an extraordinary experience. And well, sure, one, we had established a very strong relationship with the Chinese consulate. They had just opened their new consulate offices down in by the medical center. And we'd been there several times as guests of the consul general. So we scheduled a tour for the consul general and his staff. And they came in, and we had full-time elders who had been assigned to the Chinese branch in Houston actually do the interpreting. And it was an extraordinary experience. I think Elder Pinnaker led the tour. We were on the tour with him, but because we knew everybody there. And it was an amazing experience. But here's what happened the next day.
We were leading a tour. We had a group. And as we were walking through the beginning into the temple, we saw a whole line of the Chinese spouses and other workers
that had not been there
before. And when they went, when the consul general went back, he told them all about it, and they all wanted to come. So, and they were not in a line that would move them through very fast. And so I broke away, and I got to lead that.
That's amazing.
Through the temple, and it was wonderful.
It's amazing.
And they were so thrilled, to be there.
I love that. I love the community coming together and getting to see everyone experience that. It sounds like it was all very positive.
To me, this is what's significant about that open house number of 110,000. We estimate that of the 110,000 people that went through that temple during that crammed, jammed 2 weeks, 70,000 plus were not members of the church.
That's amazing. That is a missionary opportunity for a lifetime.
It was. beginning with the very first day, which is a by invitation only, extended to the contractors,
I see.
their families, and the neighborhood. They were the estimate was we'll get 1,500 people. Over 6,000 people came just from those groups.
Amazing.
Very first day.
Was it? I'm guessing it was all day. Do you remember how many hours?
Oh, it was
each day?
And I want
well into the night.
it was record high.
So that was significant. People
was
well into the 90s.
And the humidity, how that is. It was August, wasn't it?
Wow.
Whoa.
It's a huge feat to coordinate all of that. That is amazing to me. And to keep the temple clean and to keep the feeling sacred, that is so impressive. But yeah, no, that's amazing. I didn't realize that was such a good turnout. And it sounds like a lot of people had really positive impressions of the temple.
Well, the other unique aspect of this, there was virtually no opposition.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it was so minor. And there were folks that were passing things out that were, in opposition to the temple and the church. But we kept taking water to them because it was so hot.
Yeah.
And people wouldn't roll their windows down because it was so hot. I don't know what the reasons were, but that didn't last more than a couple of days. And it was literally an event without opposition. Love
that. The church doesn't build temples in secret. They try so hard to get the community aware and then invite everyone to come see it. It's definitely meant to, it's not secret, it's sacred. And that's, I think, the way they treat it.
I know in our stake, we were invited to invite our neighbors, our friends into our home and let them ask questions and share with them. And the church does such an incredible job of media presentations where you can share about the temple. And we had many in our own home. And we're invited into others' homes to help participate in sharing about the temple and the purpose of the temple. And I think that helped because our own personal neighborhoods are right here at the temple. And so the temple is located in an area that is well established and very prestigious.
Beautiful area. It's
and
so
so
well kept.
We needed to help them to know how wonderful this was going to be for them.
Yeah, we would hold with a lot of frequency. We would hold these, for lack of a better term, these firesides, in-home firesides in the neighborhoods. Fascinating experiences came out of that. From the time of the announcement, where we actually sent our youth from our stake with door hangers with frequently asked questions. What is a temple? A photo. We scoured the entire neighborhood around that temple. That happened before the announcement in General Conference.
Wow.
Yes. That happened Saturday morning at General Conference before the groundbreaking.
And we did get permission to do it.
Yes.
It wasn't we decided, we're going to.
We set it up, and that was all. They were all delivered by the youth. And then from the announcement until the open house, we would hold these firesides. Pretty good times.
I think I've heard, and I don't know if it was President Nielsen, but talked about how with every temple that's built, the community is elevated, not just in the physical beauty of the area, but the people that are now working in temples, they're bringing their testimonies to this area, and they're able to serve those around them. And it's just how every temple builds the community around them.
That's absolutely the case here in this temple, in this neighborhood, in this area, Cypress Creek area. From the time the temple opened through Harvey and to today, there's rarely a week or a month that doesn't go by that I don't get a phone call from somebody in that neighborhood who wants to let me know what's going on with the country club area, the old golf course, what kind of negotiations are happening on the floodplain. And it's always referencing our temple, not your temple.
Right.
Our temple.
That's cool. I just got goosebumps. That's really amazing. I'm so glad you both are here. Thank you so much. Yeah, it sounds like it was I can only imagine just the spirit. I bet it was just so strong, and you can tell thousands of people felt compelled to be there and to see. And I'm sure just the experiences were experiences of a lifetime. The cornerstone was placed on August 25th, and the book just said 26 items were gathered by the historical committee in the box, and then that President Hinckley and others assisted in the cornerstone sealing. Every dedicatory prayer is available to read on the church website. I'll include the link for the Houston. But I did think I wanted to add a little bit. President Hinckley spoke at the dedication on the 26th, saying it would be a great loss to have such a beautiful temple in Houston and not use it to capacity. He encouraged members to do all they could to move forward God's work, and he concluded with, "Get going. There's a lot for us to do," which, again, I love President Hinckley. He's just a spitfire of a man. I thought I'd include just some highlights, some quotes from the dedicatory prayer. "Let thy blessings rest upon all who will serve here. Smile with favor upon the temple presidency, the matron and her assistants, and all who labor with them in administering the great and singular work for which this temple has been erected. Let thy Holy Spirit touch the hearts of all who come as patrons. Manifest unto them the importance of that which they do, and grant them a satisfaction in their service. Bless thy work throughout the world. Grant faith and strength to all who have embraced it, that they may keep the faith. Bless the families of the church with a security and unity and love. Let thy sustaining hand rest upon thy people. Magnify them, prosper them, let them feel of thine overpowering love." So yeah, any specific memories from the temple being dedicated? They usually it's a pretty profound. I've been to one temple dedication. It's very profound in the spirit.
It is absolutely a celestial experience. I guess that's all I can say. Is
Yeah.
It's pure love from your Heavenly Father and the Savior. And it's felt so deeply and personally. And then that pure love and that spirit remains there. It does not leave, as you can witness.
Yes. When you just, even on the temple grounds, spirit, there's something different there. And I know people recognize that. Again, not just because it's so physically beautiful, they keep the area so well kept, but there's a different feeling on the grounds. Going to a temple dedication, is it by invitation only, I would imagine? Or?
No. Well, for the Houston Temple,
Mhm.
you had to have we recommend a card.
I see.
And, the temple itself was laid out so that every room was converted for the purposes of the dedication.
Mm-hmm.
The other element of this that I think sometimes went by a little unnoticed was our stake center became an adjunct to the temple. And in order to qualify during those 2 days of dedicatory sessions, because there was more than one
I
session.
didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. President Hinckley, of course, did it the first time, and then Elder Holland was
see.
there for others. But the stake center became an annex or an adjunct to the temple.
Okay.
And as you walk into into that stake center, you felt something different.
And you had to show your recommend.
I
did not realize that.
Card. So in every session, there was a stake president who presided over the dedicatory services in the stake center.
Did they do broadcasts there?
Everything was broadcast.
It was broadcast. Okay. So then you were both able to serve in the temple presidency. I was set apart to be a temple worker. Yeah, I didn't know if you'd remember me. I was the one with the hair color problems.
Red hair.
Yes, I do. Now it's red. It changes every day. It's like a mood ring. So, and that's a 3-year calling, is serving in the temple presidency?
Yes.
Okay. Your presidency, it was during the Hurricane Harvey, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was. And the tax day flood.
I didn't even include that one. I thought we had Hurricane Harvey to talk about, but yeah, that's a lot of responsibility.
We had a
yes.
prelude to hurricane.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't actually know how bad was it. Did the temple get flooded during the tax day floods?
Close.
Okay.
It was amazing. It was inches.
Yeah.
It was. It was. I'm trying to think. I think just a small little corner of the
The ancillary building? Or? Yeah, I gotcha.
That work was not
Took a little
coming
bit of
out.
water.
Okay, I see.
The
Yeah,
ancillary building.
just a tiny bit though, just a corner of it.
I've often feel there are times where I think, oh, the Lord wouldn't let anything bad happen to this building, but almost always, with the the Provo Tabernacle, how it ended up becoming a temple site because of the things it went through. And I think with us reinforcing, or with the church reinforcing the Salt Lake Temple right now, I think sometimes the Lord allows these things to happen to help us see a better way to better establish the temple in the future. When was the tax day floodings? Do you remember? Was that
Tax day, April, the year before.
the year before? Okay, nice. Yeah, I was going to say August
April
2017.
15th.
In August 2017, a Category 4 hurricane made a landfall on Louisiana and Texas. Were your homes affected by that?
No.
Good. We were
No,
so
we were very blessed.
When we moved to this area, my dad insisted we pay the extra money to build up the foundation a foot higher than what they recommended, because he said, I just don't want to lose everything that we've done, and it's already paid itself many times over. We were very thankful, and we kind of designed our backyard so it would flood the neighbors before it would ever flood us, so we would get plenty of warning, but our neighbors don't love that. It just worked out that way. Don't panic. Over 48,000 homes were affected by Harvey throughout Texas, including 1,000 that were completely destroyed and more than 17,000 that sustained major damage. Houston observed about 30 inches of rain and several tornadoes spawned in the area. The Houston temple was flooded. That picture, if you look up, the Houston, Texas temple flooding, that picture of just all the water right in front, I actually thought it was photoshopped when I was looking through pictures, and I realized, no, that was a hurricane. That was an actual picture of the temple. I had written, and this is just what it said on the church site, that the baptistry had been flooded to the top, and there were several inches of water on the main floor, and then the upper floor with just the humidity. Were there mold issues? I would imagine, with the humidity and moisture. Yeah,
There could have been. They installed right after. There were several big fans and dehumidifying equipment that was brought in, because there was no power.
Yeah.
So it was all run off a generator.
That would have been so interesting to see what the temple looked like at that time. I know the construction was just intensive to repair. It took 7 months, although it was very careful to note that was pretty impressive timing to be able to restore such a large building. And then a lot of changes were made. So yeah, getting to serve in that time, that would have been exciting. How long did you both serve in the Houston temple? And you both continued to serve in the Houston temple, right?
My first assignment came as a sealer in 2007.
I was called at the same time and invited to become an ordinance worker in the temple. And it was about 3 or 4 months after he had already been called to be a sealer and set apart and received authority. Mm-hmm. It was a little overwhelming. We had just returned from serving as mission president in South Chicago, and the transition, then jumping in and learning how to serve the Lord in another special, wonderful way. It was overwhelming, but absolutely amazing how the Lord takes over and qualifies you. You do your part, and he makes more of you than you ever could on your own.
I remember getting a blessing once that said that the Lord can make up for everything, but enthusiasm is something you can bring. And the Lord always works with that. The Lord always works with the willing. It's very, very rarely, if you listen to any of the saints' books or read any of the saints' books, it's really rarely the experts in all these things. They're, especially the early church with farmers and Joseph Smith, who had very little education. It's just, when we bring our willingness, the Lord just makes so much out of it. And it's just such a testimony that the Lord is in charge of this church and the temple. It's just, things wouldn't be able to work out, not only as smoothly and nicely as they do, but with all of those tender mercies along the way of things that could, you could say are coincidences, but there's just no way that it would work without the Lord being in charge. I served in the Houston temple for 5 years, and I just felt every temple is very welcoming and friendly, but I think especially in Texas, everybody, it's just that Southern hospitality is very real. A lot of, feel like a lot of workers wanted to kind of take me under their wing and kind of teach me. And all of it was an amazing experience. I found myself able to better memorize things that I needed to faster than I had been able to do in school for things. And I just felt like all those experiences you get experiences serving in the temple that you just can't get otherwise. I'm really glad I got the chance. And you serve as a sealer currently.
Yes.
Do you both remember? Did you feel like you knew you were going to be called to be in the temple presidency, or was it surprising, or you kind of knew it was coming?
It was a possibility
Yeah.
because we knew the president real well.
That's a
And
good point.
he kept calling and visiting
Yeah,
us.
that's how it always.
But not really.
I know I'm sure you can't talk about specifics, but you have a few months of training before you officially serve, right? Because they announced the temple presidency way before they're called, correct?
They announced the president. And
I see.
Then there's a certain period of time where then the selection of counselors has to be submitted and cleared.
Mm-hmm.
When we started, it was November. When were we informed? A month or two before.
Mm-hmm.
For us, it wasn't a difficult transition because we lived close to the temple.
Mm-hmm. Been serving there.
They're serving there for a while. Yep. So it wasn't a big challenge in terms of not knowing, right? Mm-hmm. Not knowing anything.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a wonderful assignment. And,
yeah.
We were out of service for 7 months, yeah. but it actually turned out to be a blessing. Harvey did. I mean, it's not in terms of the devastation. That was a real problem, but we took advantage of the time to get out and meet with wards and sticks while the temple was closed. And I think we are so convinced, at least I am now, because I felt awful when it flooded, because I've been involved in bringing, advocating to bring the elevation of the temple up in the first place when it was originally being designed.
Yeah.
We added, 4 or 5 feet to the original plan. But there was a clear message. It didn't come right away. It took a couple of months. There were 2 things that came through. One is the Lord had not walked away from his temple. It was going to get fixed and rededicated, and everything was going to be fine. But number 2 is, in my opinion, one of the great values of having the temple shut down was we had to focus on our communities. The disaster that was left by Hurricane Harvey, as you know, was nothing short of extraordinary. And to have had the temple still functioning and open would have been a distraction. We needed to focus on taking care of our neighbors, working together to do what we could. And we would attend different state conferences and different meetings throughout the Houston area during that period of time, especially at the front end. And people would come up after a conference and they'd say things like, my house flooded. And I was not happy with God until his house flooded.
Interesting.
When I found out his house flooded, it was okay. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
And I think that was a pretty powerful statement back during that time. And I hope we never forget it. The temple is the symbol of our devotion to and worship of God. But it is not where everything happens. We have to then take it into our lives. What we learn and what we receive in terms of the commitments, the covenants we make with God in his house, we have an obligation. I really believe personally that was a big part of the effect of the temple as a consequence of Hurricane Harvey.
That was wonderful insight.
And by the way, one of the things that came out of this was a unity within the community itself. It wasn't just the Houston temple that flooded. It was the parish, the Catholic parish that flooded. It was the church there. It was this sort of universal, God causes the rain to fall. I'll never forget, for example, it was shortly after that time, we were mucking out some houses with our yellow shirts and the Knights of Columbus. Catholics and us, it didn't make any difference. We were there doing the Lord's work together. I remember to this day a very special meeting with the parish priest over at St. Ignatius. And their parish had flooded badly as well. They were out. They were done.
And actually, the temple opened before they were back in their parish.
Yeah. So we're having this meeting. How are we doing? How can we help each other? Pretty special stuff.
Believe that.
As tragic as it was, and as costly as it was. Here's the other reality. When the temple reopened, during that period of time, there was a shift of emphasis in terms of the introduction of a phrase, a 2-word phrase, loving kindness, that the temple is the house of the Lord, and it's a holy place, and we treat each other with that loving kindness, that generosity of friendliness combined with, we're here to welcome you as the Savior would. That's the whole emulation expectation, right?
Yeah.
That was all presented and developed during that period of time when our temple was shut down. And secondly, because we were able to sit down and meet with the stakes and the wards throughout the Houston area, it was, when the temple opens, how can we create this sort of hospitality, this love generation, right? And the consequence of that was, when the temple reopened, it reopened not with a surge, because surges come and go. It reopened with a sustainable whole new level of committed and dedicated effort.
That spirit of ministry.
Yeah, it was a marvelous thing. You take the trial and the tribulation and, and you make it work.
That really parallels what you're talking about with the temple open house, that community.
Absolutely.
And how the Houston temple's always brought people together in the good times and the hard times.
Exactly.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
For me, I just didn't think the Lord was going to let that happen.
Sure, yeah.
I was really shocked and waiting to be able to go back, having to wait. It was a time of introspection, how easy it is to take the blessings of the temple for granted. And I remember the day that it was dedicated, walking through those temple doors again, walking up those stairs, and the emotion just overcame me. I was so grateful. The gratitude I had was so deep that we were back in his house, and it was going to be rededicated for his purposes. And the spirit was pretty incredible, and my gratitude was over the top.
It's amazing. I remember having patrons coming back after the lockdown. We were slowly reopening and seeing the relief on their faces of just being home again.
Yep.
Yeah. That was something I'll always remember, getting to serve during that time.
Pretty nice. Yeah.
I just really appreciate both of your testimonies. Thank you so much. I can end with a little bit of a quote from the rededication prayer, which was offered by President N. Russell Ballard. And speaking of those working, it mentioned that when he came to visit, he put on the yellow shirt and was out serving as well.
Yep.
So I'll just kind of end on this. He said in the prayer, "We, thy children, join together to rededicate the beautiful Houston, Texas temple, which suffered great damage as a result of flooding caused by the catastrophic Hurricane Harvey on August 25th through 29th, 2017, exactly 17 years from the day of dedication. We pray for those whose homes, health, or employment were adversely impacted by the hurricane and floods. We acknowledge the dedicatory prayer pronounced by thy prophet, President Gordon B. Hinckley, on August 26th and 27th, 2000. We petition that all of President Hinckley's blessings on the temple and upon families and thy work throughout the world remain in force. May our hearts be filled with love as we pray for one another throughout the world. We rejoice today to once again have this, thy holy house, the Houston, Texas temple, available for our blessing and the blessing of all thy children. We acknowledge thy hand in all things and pronounce this dedicatory blessing in the name of thy beloved Son, whose atoning sacrifice enables all the blessings of the temple to be efficacious in this world, as well as beyond the veil, in the sacred name of Jesus Christ. Amen." just again, thank you so much for both being guests on my podcast. The Houston Temple it's a crown jewel in this area, and I'm so excited to get a second temple. I'm so excited to visit it, and hopefully we'll all get to go to the open house and experience that outpouring and that flooding of just the wonderful spirit of the temple that the Lord brings to our lives. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having us.
Absolutely, thanks.
Never thought we'd have an interview in a closet.
Hey, you're welcome. Now you got the chance. I'm here to serve. Anyway, for any listeners, as always, I will include all of the links of any resources that we used to discuss in the episode notes. And until then, have a celestial day.